What is up, guys? Welcome to Barrookie. In today's video, I want to talk about piriformis syndrome or lateral hip pain on one side when squatting or when walking. As you may or may not know, I am on a journey to collect every chronic injury around the joints so that I can make videos about it. Actually, I'm not, but I'm on my way involuntarily. Now, that joke aside, at the beginning of last year, I started to reintroduce squats, and I really was looking for the perfect technique. And at that moment, I really started to hurt my hip whenever I did squats. When I stopped doing squats and when I stopped doing jiu-jitsu, everything went better, but then everything returned once I reintroduced these activities. So where is my pain really originating? So in my left hip, right underneath my pelvis, I really feel like a nagging pain around the glute max, glute medius area. Like, I'm saying that area because if you know hip anatomy, it's a very complex structure, so you're never going to really pinpoint which muscle it's actually hurting. I had to find a solution. I went to a doctor, they gave me anti-inflammatory drugs. It worked. As I took the drugs, after I stopped taking them, the pain just returned, so we were back at square one. I went to a physical therapist also. He cracked my back open, my lower back, and the pain went away for about 10 to 20 minutes, and just as I was walking out of the office of the physical therapist, the pain just got back. So that wasn't really working either. He gave me also a lot of exercises to do, like 20, where I had to do 3 sets of 15, which was way too much. I couldn't really get to do all the exercises every single day, and I had to stop that altogether. I looked into rebuilding Milo, where Aaron talks about piriformis syndrome, which is actually a good description of what I have, where my pain is. Unfortunately, this book really doesn't explain how to specifically fix it, and the exercises that are in there really didn't work for me. I came across another video where somebody was saying, like, if you have piriformis syndrome, it's very difficult because maybe there's an asymmetry in one hip versus the other one, and you're going to look at that asymmetry and try to fix that, but maybe that asymmetry has nothing to do with your pain, and maybe the pain is situated somewhere else. Then I was looking into another video which talked about if you have piriformis syndrome, that usually goes hand in hand with anterior pelvic tilt, and then he went on and gave some exercises to that. And that was really the first video where it clicked for me. Lateral hip pain and anterior pelvic tilt. So anterior pelvic tilt is where your pelvis is tilted forward. And I was thinking maybe that pelvis tilting forward is causing me some hip pain. If we look at an anterior pelvic tilt, they also call that lower cross syndrome. So that means that the glutes and the abs are weak and that the lower back and the hip flexors are typically tight. So what that means is it really pulls your hip out of alignment. And that's something that a lot of people have, because if you sit for long periods of time, that typically happens because by sitting, you make your glutes weak and you really tighten up that hip flexor complex. So that is really going to make your pelvis shift forward. Now, I knew that my glutes were strong enough. Now, what is a problem for me is the tight hip flexors. As long as I know about the exercise lunge, I always felt a very sharp pain in my hip, and that is also something that was super tight, which I couldn't get loose. On the other hand, when I'm squatting, I also have difficulty bracing my core and keeping my pelvis neutral by contracting my abs. So I knew that my core was weak and my hip flexors were tight. So I had to look there. Started working on those two and my pain gradually went away. Something I also did was, as I was walking, I tried to turn my pelvis neutral and I contracted my core to keep it that way, and I tried to walk like that. And I really felt that just doing that was already alleviating a lot of the pain in my left hip. Every single day, instead of doing 10 exercises, what I did was I did a hip stretch and I did my planks. In that hip flexor stretch, I also enforced that posterior pelvic tilt. I really exaggerate that tilt of the pelvis, making sure that pelvis tilts backwards, and then I'm going into a lunge position and I hold that for 30 seconds, do that 3 times, and I really feel that my hips are opening up. Now, as it comes to planks, what you really want to do is you want to enforce also that neutral pelvis. So if you go into a plank, you open up your legs a little bit so that you have more space for your hips to move. And then you go from an exaggerated anterior pelvic tilt to a very exaggerated posterior pelvic tilt. And you're going to feel that with that, your glutes and your core are going to contract. And you want to enforce that contraction even more. And by doing so, you're going to help your body learn what is a good pelvis position. That is really going to help you teach your body what a neutral pelvis is. You're also going to teach your core how to contract in order to move your pelvis in the right direction. Before I went squatting, I did some split squats, and split squats are basically like lunges, but you put your back foot a little bit higher so that you can have a little bit more of a stretch. And once you're in that position, you're going to tilt your pelvis forward, so you're doing a posterior pelvic tilt. So you put a lot more tension on that hip flexor, and if you're then going to the movement, you're going to really open up that hip flexor and make sure it gets loose again. And that was really a great one, because when I then went into a squat, the squat went perfectly. It was like my hips got a lot more room in them, and I could go a lot deeper into my hips. So that was a very good exercise to do before my squats. Doing that really helped me get rid of that lateral hip pain or that piriformis syndrome. So it doesn't have to be a plethora of exercises that you need to do. You just need to find what is really causing your pain, and probably it's going to be an anterior pelvic tilt, because anterior pelvic tilt is most of the time caused by too much sitting. By sitting too much, by fixing your body into a posture, you're going to stiffen the muscles in that posture, and you're going to make the other ones that need to work more weaker. And we also need to break up that habit. So what you can do is, one, you can tackle the problems head on. Like, my hip flexor is tight, tackle that problem. My core is weak, tackle that problem. My glutes are weak, tackle that problem. So we can do that. But what we also need to do is we find a lasting solution, so that when we go back to our normal lives, is that we don't reintroduce those tight hip flexors, we don't weaken our core again. And the way you do that is by movement. Break up your habit of sitting. The exercises are great, but they have to be accompanied by the changes that you introduce into your day-to-day life. So I hope I gave you some guidelines as to what can possibly help you get rid of that pain, because I'm not a physical therapist. I'm just a guy that has sometimes a lot of nagging issues, and I try to get to the bottom of them and try to attack them head on. So I hope you can learn something from me exploring my own body. So thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you liked this video. I hope you got something out of it. If you have a friend who has nagging hip pain, please send them this video, and I guess I'll be seeing you all in the next video. Peace!